Welcome everyone. I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's event, Next Gen DevOps on AWS, Empower Teams with Amazon Q and Generative AI. Presenting today's topic is Terumi Laskowski. Terumi is an Amazon authorized instructor and author with over 25 years of IT experience. She is trained globally on architecting, DevOps, security engineering, machine learning, and development, and is recognized as a leading security expert. Her expertise spans IT security, IT GRC, IT management, and communications. Terumi has held executive IT roles across financial, software, and IT services sectors, serving private industry, government, and military organizations, while consulting on security initiatives for Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored to your specific requirements. If you are interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is also being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We do have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the Data and AI practice area. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio of courses for the topic being covered today. Our upcoming classes include various trainings on the given courses. You can also access a variety of marketing assets, such as the free training and blogs, by clicking on the available event handout. These offerings can be found with a simple search on our website at netcomlearning.com. In this session, we'll explore the future of DevOps and how Amazon Q, powered by Generative AI, is transforming the way teams build, deploy, and manage applications on AWS. Learn how intelligent automation and AI-driven insights can streamline operations, accelerate CI/CD pipelines, and reduce downtime across the DevOps lifecycle. Whether you're a business leader seeking agility or a technical practitioner driving innovation, you'll gain practical strategies for leveraging Amazon Q to enhance productivity, collaboration, and decision-making. So let's dive into how AWS equips you with the tools, models, and guidance to harness next-gen DevOps for impactful business outcomes. Now I would like to give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To begin with, you do have the option to view in full screen by clicking on the full screen button on the right side of the GoToWebinar viewer. Simply hit the escape key to exit the full screen. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters here in the questions pane, and we will address them at the end of the session. And to get the best out of today's events, we've included the slides, courses we talk about, and marketing assets in the handouts section of your GoToWebinar viewer. You may refer to them at any time to get a better understanding of today's topic. And we do realize that some of you may have to leave early and want to let you know that as you do leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to take a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience and improve our future sessions for you. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. And now I'd like to pass this over to our trainer to present today's topic. Hey, Terumi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Tracy, for that wonderful introduction. And hi, everyone. My name is Terumi Laskowski. I'm a AWS authorized instructor, and it is my pleasure to be presenting this webinar for you today. And the title is the Next Gen DevOps on AWS. And the specific topic is Empower Teams with Amazon Q and Generative AI. All right, so let's get started. Hang on just a moment. Let me get my slides going here. There we go. All right, so next gen DevOps. Here we go. So today's agenda is, firstly, I've already introduced myself. My name is Terumi, and the objective of today's session, and it's going to be around 90 minutes. Okay, so within this 90-minute session, we're going to talk about Amazon Q for DevOps specifically. So we'll look at how Amazon Q, the AWS's generative AI assistant, is really transforming the way DevOps teams build, deploy, and operate our applications. Already? Now, before we go into that, let's just cover the structure and timing. So I will do the lecture first, and then because it is around 90 minutes, we'll take a short break, maybe a 5-minute break somewhere in the middle. And then at the end of my lecture or the webinar, I will take questions. Okay, and so please go ahead and submit your questions. And I will also let you know when the break is. And break will probably be about 5 minutes or so. Okay, all right, so let's move on. The agenda. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to be talking about these 8 things. Well, actually 7 things. Okay, so first, let's go and talk about what Amazon Q is all about, right? And as is true for any AWS services, security is of the utmost importance. And I'm not sure if you've been hearing about all these security issues related to Gen AI. So we're going to talk about security and expectations from the generative AI in general and Amazon Q specifically. Then we will go into DevOps, the enhancing CI/CD pipeline. CI stands for continuous integration. CD stands for continuous deployment or delivery. So that is the automation arm of DevOps. So we'll talk about that. Then what's involved in DevOps is specifically the automation part of it. So here we'll talk about coding, testing, and deployment, and how Amazon Q specifically will enhance any one of these processes. Then another part about Amazon Q is that it can accelerate troubleshooting. So we'll see what that is all about. And it's always nice to kind of see what actual customers are doing and what benefits they're receiving by using generative AI in their DevOps processes. So we'll talk about real world outcomes. And finally, if you're a business person, return on investment must be pretty important, right? And generative AI and also the cloud makes it possible for you to start small and then just grow as your ROI makes sense. So we're going to talk about ROI and how do you actually get started with integrating Amazon Q with your DevOps processes. Then we will take your questions, Q&A, and then we'll have a webinar wrap up. There you go. So somewhere around 4 and 5, we'll probably take a short break. Okay, so if that is all good, let's move on to the very first topic. There we go. Let's talk about Amazon Q. Okay. Have you ever wondered what Q stands for? Right. So I read somewhere that actually meant quantum, but as it turns out, that was a false information. Right. It must have been one of my AI assistant that was giving me a wrong answer. So Q, I guess it stands for query. So it's querying your corporate data, but Amazon Q is a lot more than query. Okay, so let's see what Amazon Q is specifically. So as always, let's start with the definition. Okay, so Amazon Q is AWS's generative AI powered assistant. Okay, assistant, right? So that means you could think of it as an AI teammate right? AI assistant that helps developers, operations people, and even business people with their day-to-day business. And if you're a developer, they'll help you with coding and others. If you are operations engineer, they'll help you with operational issues within the AWS environment. And if you're a business person, Q will actually help you to drill down into your business information that you have inside AWS. So things like infrastructure, managing pipelines, troubleshooting issues, and gaining or garnering business intelligence from the data that you have. So, but one thing we have to remember though, is that, unlike other generative AI tools that you may hear about, I won't mention names here, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, there are so many generative AI and also large language models or LLM out there in the world. So how is Amazon Q different from all the other LLMs and generative AI tools? Well, unlike those tools, Amazon Q is made by AWS, so it is very, very deeply integrated into the AWS's ecosystem. That is, AWS environment is something that Amazon Q understands. So that means not only can it generate code, as we'll discuss a little bit later on, it actually understands AWS services. When it comes to security, they understand permissions. And also, what's really, really great is that it also understands Amazon and AWS's best practices on deploying their infrastructure, running operations, and how to leverage all the data that you have inside AWS, right? So it's also an AWS expert as well. So for example, you can ask Amazon Q inside, let's say, a integrated development environment, or editor in short, to, let's say, generate a unit test for a Python function. I'm going to show you that in a little bit, okay? And also you can ask inside AWS console, so not in the editor, but like a terminal where you can run command line interfaces. You can say, hey, why is my Lambda function failing? And it can actually analyze the errors. So because it knows about AWS, or use the QCLI inside your terminal and say, hey, create an S3 bucket with encryption enabled. Okay, and it will output that exact CLI command. And on top of that, if you ask it and if you permit it, it'll create that bucket for you. Isn't that great? Okay, so that's the definition. It's a generative AI assistant. It's not someone or something to replace you. It's there to enhance you so that you can leverage it, that you could do more work in a more efficient manner. Okay, and so there we go. So let's go ahead and look at Q a little bit differently now, because you see, Q just isn't a Q. There are 3 different types of Q. Okay, so there's Amazon Q Developer, Amazon Q Business, Amazon Q in Connect. Now, the Q that we will be focusing in on this webinar is the Amazon Q Developer, right? This is the one we're going to focus on, right? Because it helps the software engineers and DevOps teams specifically to generate code, test your code, create your pipeline, troubleshoot your pipeline, and troubleshoot other issues, right? So that's a Q Developer. But Q Business is just as powerful because it's really aimed at the enterprise business users. It actually connects to internal data sources, like, I don't know, if you have SharePoint, yeah, if you're using Confluence, Salesforce, or any other types of data store, it allows these business people to query that data themselves, right, for business intelligence. And that's really, you're empowering them to do, self-service work when it comes to the data. So they could get the data, the type of the data they want, when they want it, but they may not know how to do it, right? So you could go ahead and ask Amazon Q to do Q Business to help you out. And then, last but not least, we have Amazon Q in Connect. So this actually is this powers customers and customer service agents, well, actually not customers, but customer service agents, sorry, in Amazon Connect contact centers or service centers by providing real-time AI-generated responses and workflows. So that is a very specific implementation and use case of Amazon Q. So anyway, there are also many other integrations like Q in QuickSight. Not sure if you know what that is, but QuickSight is a visualization tool, and it's a BI tool, business intelligence tool, that the business users can use to drill down their own data. And for our DevOps team, we have Q developer is really a star of the show, right? So the one that sits in your IDE, that's a Q developer. The one that sits in your CLI, that's also a Q developer, and it also sits in your AWS console. Okay, so we will definitely show you some of those examples. But before we get to that, let's talk about security. Security and expectations. Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's go ahead. Now, before we really dive deeper into the Amazon Q developer and the integration into the DevOps processes, let's talk about AWS services in general and how secure they are. Okay, because security and the security of your processes, security of your resources, and security of your data is of the utmost concern when it comes to AWS. They want to protect that, right? And they want to help you protect that data. Okay. Now, let me actually do a bit of Blackboard diagram here. Okay, so hang on just a moment. Let me go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to switch to the Blackboard. Okay, so here we are. The way AWS services work with security works like this. So let's say that you have an AWS account. So here we go. Let's say you have AWS account. Okay, so that's your AWS account, right? And we'll put some things in there. So let's say, maybe a bucket, S3 bucket, maybe, right? And it could even be Amazon Q because it's a service. And just fill in the X, Amazon Q developer, Amazon Q business, right? You just go and do that because it is a service after all. Okay, and then let's say you are accessing that. Now, in order for you to access anything on AWS, you actually have to authenticate. That is to prove that you are who you say you are, right? And that's usually done by something like ID and password or equivalent, right? Equivalent to something that's ID and password. And after you after you have your credentials, when you connect, before you can even get to your services, AWS is actually going to say stop. Okay, and they'll say, who are you? Who? Right? And it's going to actually figure out that you actually have this ID. Well, you've actually used this ID and password because the request that you send here, you're sending a request. Okay, is actually digitally signed by your ID and password. So when your request reaches AWS, but right before it reaches your service, AWS will check it and say, who are you, right? Then you say, well, I'm Terumi, And then so in AWS, there is this thing called IAM, Identity and Access Management. And hopefully Terumi is registered there. There we go. I'll just put T, okay? So the AWS will check and say, okay, let me check. All right, let's check here. Oh yeah, she's here. And is the password correct? Right. So it'll check for the user. And if everything's okay, it says, okay, yeah, you exist. okay? And on top of that, Terumi is not just the fact that she exists, but she has to have permissions. So I'll put policy, right? This will, give me some permission to allow something or to deny something, right? So if I want to then use, let's say, Amazon Q, or if I want to access S3, my policy has to allow me to do that. If not, my request will be rejected, okay? But if I am assigned with a policy that allows me to access these services, then I can use them, okay? So that's basically how the system works. That is, even before anybody can even touch and think about working with any system, including Amazon Q, one must have permission to do so, okay? And the default for these permission in AWS is 0. That is, when somebody creates you as a user, you have 0 permissions. So somebody have to intentionally give you that permission. Okay, so now you see how in general this thing works. Now let's talk about then, well, okay, so if that's the case, what if I have, and I'll put this in green, so it'll be something different. So what if I have Amazon Q that has to, let's say, I've asked it to create a bucket, let's say. Okay, hey, create a bucket. Okay, well, Amazon Q is not going to be able to create the bucket unless it's been given permission to do so. Okay, so somebody has to give it permission. And normally, how we give permission to things like Amazon Q is to assign it something called a role. Yes, this is a hat. No, it's not a duckbill. Okay, so it's a role. All right, so it's the way to allow services like Amazon Q to have certain permissions, because with a role, once again, we can attach a policy, right? So this is going to say what you can do and what you can't do. So here it is, allow, deny. Okay, so if I ask Amazon Q, hey, please create for me an S3 bucket, if the Amazon Q developer, let's say, has proper permission, it will be able to create it. But somebody has to intentionally give that permission. Okay, so AWS has a very, very stringent and strict what's called access control mechanisms. So that includes authentication, proving who you are, authorization, what that service or person can do. And then on top of that, it keeps a very close eye on what things are done. So logs, monitoring, right? All those things are done on almost everything that you do in AWS. So there you go. So that is the traditional security that's applied within AWS, okay? And that applies for Amazon Q. So I hope that's clear. All right, so let me go ahead and clear this thing, and we'll get back into our PowerPoint presentation. Alrighty, so that is the security foundation. So I just explained to you the IAM and permissions, okay? Respect IAM roles and access controls, so that you know that you could safely know that whatever you ask Amazon Q to do, it will only do things that you gave permission for it to do, okay? And there's no unauthorized data access. It must all be allowed and given access by you or someone in your organization. And also, these are all separate services, right? So if the Amazon Q, let's say, fetches some data and then it brings it back, it has to travel between it and where the data source is, let's say S3 bucket. Well, in transit, as the data travels across the network to, let's say, Q, it will always be encrypted in transit. And also when it is in rest, that is when it's being stored, it will also be encrypted. And also here, I have this thing called customer managed and KMS key optional. This is where if you want the encryption to happen at a higher level, that is at a more stringent level where you, the user, have more control over the encryption keys, you have a choice to use a service called Key Management Service, which I have here. If not, there are other types of keys that are free or cheaper that you can use. So there you go. That's the security foundation before we go right into Amazon Q. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next topic. Hang on just a moment. All right, so let's set expectations on what Q can do. Well, rather than saying what Q can do, it's more of what does generative AI do? What can it do? Okay, so and also specifically the Q developer, right? Because you ask some people and they'll say, oh yeah, Gen AI, it could do anything. You just ask it to do stuff and they'll come up with the proper answers. Oh yeah, and we could connect with almost anything. No, right? So that's not really true. So let's take a look at some limitations, right? Or some features, right, of these services. Now, let's talk first about the third-party connectors, that is integration with some third-party applications, okay, and tools, right? So generative AI is pretty powerful, for sure, but it's not magic, right? It's really not magic. So Amazon Q developer doesn't yet really integrate with every third-party tool. It connects with many, but not all, right? And it may be one of those the tools that you're already using in your DevOps, and it may integrate with that. So make sure you check before you set those expectations. Okay. Now, also, have you heard about this thing called hallucinations? Okay, so I'm not sure if that's a proper term, but when generative AI answers your question, right, and gives you the answer, it sounds pretty confident. They won't say, I'm not sure if this is the answer, but here. No, they won't say that. They say, here's your answer, right? But sometimes it can be wrong. So AWS is pretty clear. If you look at the Amazon Q developer, whenever you use it, there's always that real tiny disclaimer that says, hey, generative AI can give you wrong answers sometimes. So make sure that you check it before you go head over heels over their answers. Okay, that's why human review is always required, right? You just can't let generative AI do things on its own and think that they're always going to be right. That's not the case. And this is not just about AWS, Amazon Q. It's true of most generative AI. In fact, I don't know of any generative AI tools that actually doesn't say that, okay? Because it's in its nature. It's the way it works, right? But anyway, another thing here is human in the loop, okay? It's kind of funny talking about this because DevOps started out to be that we wanted to get rid of, right, or to reduce to a minimum the human in the loop, because we said that, well, human in the loop causes delays, human in the loop causes human mistakes, okay? But when it comes to generative AI, they're not there to replace you. If that's the case, human must be in the loop, okay? So that means Amazon Q will never replace a DevOps engineer's judgment. Instead, it removes the repetitive stuff, something that, like a boilerplate work that, if you do it once, you don't want to do it 100 times, right? So you can actually focus on decisions and designs that are more, fun to do, honestly, and adds more value, right? Because your time is valuable. So let generative AI do the other stuff, the repetitive tasks, okay? And but it's not just a mindless repetition, the automation that we are used to, perhaps, right, until like several years ago. Think of Q as a junior teammate, Yeah, that's probably the right one. So junior teammate, really fast, really helpful. You don't really have to feed it. It doesn't need to take breaks. Okay, it can actually work like 24/7. Isn't that great? Okay, so but it still needs supervision. Okay, and you are responsible for guiding it, and you must give approval or reject what it can or what it cannot do. Okay, so that is the expectation to have when it comes to generative AI. Now, one of these days, that may change, but for now, this probably is a good practice. All right, so let us now talk about the next slide, which is, why are we talking about this now? Like what's happening in DevOps, where generative AI and DevOps is a hot topic, because it is. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Usually we are looking for solutions. So what problem in DevOps is solved by using generative AI, right? So what are the DevOps challenges and what are the opportunities that we have by using generative AI? So let's talk about that now, okay? So, the modern DevOps has really three big challenges. Even before DevOps, we had challenges in deploying stuff into production, right? Because the dev groups and ops groups, they didn't communicate with each other that much. They were siloed, right? I mean, you may not know this if you are new to the industry, but people like me that's been in the industry for like eons of years, right? We know the time where dev and ops were quite separate. But whatever dev creates, ops will deploy. But it took time, it took a lot of coordination, and they didn't really talk to each other, right? Due to some organizational structures and communication issues. So at one point, we said, look, this has to get better, right? So can we talk, right? Can we start to communicate with each other? And once we start to communicate with each other, maybe we could collaborate with each other. Wouldn't that be great? Do some things together, because after all, dev is the one that creates things and ops the one that deploy things, and companies benefit from that, and companies and their customers. Then once you start to collaborate, maybe we can start to integrate our work so that we work like teammates, right? And once you have the integration, guess what we have? We have automation, okay? And automation is the key. That's the thing that we were looking for in DevOps. And we've been doing that pretty well for several years now. I mean, we're talking about like tens of, how many years that the DevOps has been in existence. But now we have problems. Okay, so what are these problems, right? So DevOps has three big challenges. One, complexity. Yeah, right. So as people start to use these processes, they start adding stuff, more tools come in, and more people are using it. There are more variations. They're used for critical systems and others. So it just got really, really complex, right? And also, guess what? In parallel to this movement into DevOps, there was another movement, which is called cloud native applications. And cloud native applications involves things called microservices. And microservices are these intimacy little applications that they usually call the MVPs, the minimal viable products, that comes out of an agile type of project management. And these microservices are distributed applications. So distributed applications is by nature complex because it has to find other pieces of application to talk to over the network. So then, in order for us to deploy that in automated fashion, there's so many MVPs being created, so many microservices being created by these pipelines. So now there are lots of pipelines, right? And then there's so many cloud resources to manage. So there you go, right? So that's a very, very complex environment that we're talking about. And how about speed? One of the main reasons why we went into DevOps is to increase speed of deployment of your applications to the production by reducing friction of things like organizational friction. So speed was a main reason why we even have DevOps. But we're like junkies, right? Once we like speed, we really get hooked on speed. So now we want to have it faster. faster still, right? So the businesses now expect faster release cycles. But engineers are swamped with a lot of manual work still. And how about security? I'm actually a security consultant, and I could tell you more complexity brings in more opportunities for vulnerabilities. And if you have vulnerabilities, and threats are also increasing too, so it's really a hot ground where the threats can have so many places that they can try to attack. So that means in order to protect those resources in that environment, you have to audit more, right? You have to have stricter checks. You have to have security that's built in, that is sufficient to meet the current threat, let's say, threat environment. Okay, so there you go. Those are the three challenges, right? The complexity, the speed, and security. Okay. Now, in contrast to that, there are definitely opportunities because AI can directly help in these areas. You see, with Amazon Q, the tasks that used to take hours or days, like writing a CDK pipeline. And if you don't know what CDK is, that's okay. CDK stands for Cloud Developer Kit. It's actually integrated with the CloudFormation, which is a main infrastructure as code service in AWS, so that you can deploy infrastructure using code. And that is heavily, heavily used in DevOps these days, right? So that means Amazon Q Developer can actually write these codes that will eventually be deployed into to your accounts. And it can also generate hundreds of unit tests. I'm not sure if you're a developer, do you like creating tests? Or do you like writing code? Right? Okay. So I mean, test is required. It's really important, but it does take your time and it could get repetitive. So why not ask Q to write those unit tests for you? Well, how about if the deployment fails for some reason? So you have to troubleshoot, and that takes time. So why don't you do the first cut, that is to find out what's happening, why is it failing? Ask Q. Q is great with stuff like that because it understands code and also understands the infrastructure. So there you go. That's why many organizations are really, really looking at Q and to bring in increased velocity without really sacrificing reliability or security. In fact, to make it better. All right. So, I think at this point, it might be nice for you to kind of see, so Terumi, you've been talking about Q, but I haven't seen Q. Like, what's going on here, right? So show me Q. Okay. So let me do just a short demonstration on what Q looks like. I don't actually have the entire, development environment with the DevOps, pipeline and stuff, but I can kind of show you, how you interact with Q. Okay. It's specifically Q developer. So hang on just a moment. Let me go to there. And I have already logged into my environment. Okay, so that's, if you have an AWS environment, that's basically what it looks like, right? And I just happen to be in the US West 2, Oregon. Okay, now the part that I would like for you to kind of focus in on is, let me see here. Let me highlight this thing. See this thing right here? See that thing that's kind of hiding in the corner? Right there? Okay. That is Q. That's Q. Okay. Well, Q is like, ubiquitous. It's all over the place, right? Okay. So let me kind of show you how to work with Q. So all you have to do really is to say, hey, oh, that's Amazon Q. Nice. And I'll just click on it and I get the, the Q's, pane. Let's see if I can make this a little bit smaller so I can see the communication, right? It says, yep. So hello, I'm Amazon Q, your AWS Generative AI Assistant. Very, very good. Okay, so here we go. And so this is where I would create my prompt, right? So that's the way to talk to Q because after all, it is generative AI with the understands natural language processing. So it can understand, what I type. So remember how I told you that Q understands AWS environment? Okay, so, I'm going to ask it, I have some S3 buckets. So I want to know if it can actually find and give me a list of buckets, right? So that should be a pretty simple task, okay? So let's say, please give me a list of my S3 buckets, buckets, okay? All right, so here we go. Let's see. It says, I'll help you. Very nice. It's introspecting, getting the context. That context is basically background in where I'm asking this. It says, hey, I retrieved S3 bucket resources in my account. Very nice. And here are your S3 buckets. Wow, look at that. They say I have a total of 6 S3 buckets. Okay, now this is nothing earth-shattering, right? Because I could have gone to S3, but you know why, right? If an assistant can do it for me, okay? But this should demonstrate to you that indeed Q developer can access my environment and it understands my environment. Okay, right? So that's the first thing. Then Q can actually run in different context, right? So right now it's running inside the browser, right? But it can actually run inside a command line interface. So there's something called a Cloud Shell. So let me show you how Q works inside the Cloud Shell. Because once I have it working inside the Cloud Shell, it can actually do a lot more things than what you're seeing right here. So I'm just going to do a simple setup. And you may say, tell me after this webinar, I like to do the same thing too, but are there steps on how to set this thing up in the Cloud Shell? And I say, no, I don't have all that thing in my head. So I'm just going to ask it, right? So I'll say, hey, please give me steps to set up Q developer inside my Cloud Shell. There you go, right? So then I'll say, yay, go ahead and do that. It says, I'll help you. Thank you. Here are the step-by-step instructions on how to do that. Very nice. I do have an account. Yes, I have a CLI installed, and I do have all those things. All right, so what I'm going to do here is it's telling me to install something, and then, but see what it's so nice. It says, run this in Cloud Shell. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So let me go ahead and click on this rather than doing all the other work. So there you go, bam. And this opens up Cloud Shell. So this is a shell. Okay, and this is a good example. It's not going to do anything until you give permission to do so. Great. So I'll say, yep, I own this account. Go ahead and run this thing. Boom. So then it's going to install things, right? So now it's been installed, right? So they've downloaded Q. And let me lower this a little bit because I need to know the next step. So the next step here, the next step here is this. There we go. Here we go. And where is the next step? There we go. Step 1. Step 2, verify installation. So I could actually do that, Q version, and then configure Q developer, okay? Actually, I really don't have to do that. Oh, no, I probably do. All right, so let's go and do that. So let's go ahead and run the Cloud Shell. Let's check the version. I'll say yes, run it. And it says, yep. Oh, look at that, Q version, command not found. Look at that. Okay, so this is actually an opportunity to find out what is going on. Let me see. I seem to have multiple shells open, so let me go ahead and close that. And Q version is not found. I bet that's because it's running inside a different shell. All right, so let's see if I can actually. Yeah, sure enough, the installation did not happen. So, rather than allowing Q to go ahead and execute this, I'm just going to take the command and I'm just going to copy it, okay? And I'm going to install it inside this particular shell. There we go. All right, so here, I'm going to paste it and paste. and install. And now does that give me Q version? Oh, look at that. You know what? Tell you what, let me go ahead and say this is the, actually when I did this before the presentation, it actually worked. So this is a good opportunity to ask Q, hey, what's going on here? After installing, I get this error. And I'll put the error in here. Okay, not found. All right, boom. Indicates that the download did not complete properly or the file is corrupted. Let me help you troubleshoot this thing. Okay, please help me. That the download file is not correct binary or corrupted. Clean up the existing installation. And okay, and then what do I do? And then I have to install stuff. Like that. Okay, all right. So here we go. Download specific files. Okay, all right. So yeah, all right. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and do that. And you know what? I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so I can do this at the same time of seeing Q. So I hope it's okay. All right. So here I'm just going to remove this thing, copy, paste. Copy, paste. Okay, so that worked. And let's see, step 2. All right, copy, paste. Let's say I trust you. Don't ask me this again. All right, then step 3, once again, download. We'll do a curl command. Okay, looks like everything downloaded. Okay. All right, and I'll change mod. Okay, and then move to the system path. Okay, and so that should have been okay. And then before moving the file, check if that's okay. Steps to test. All right, so let's see, I'm crossing my fingers. I'm not exactly sure if this is going to work, but Q version. Okay, all right. So sorry. I thought I was going to show it to you. It was working before, but obviously I'm doing something wrong here. Anyway, but you see how Q does help, but eventually, you know, you have to do some work as well, okay? Because Q is not there to do everything automatically for you. I'm actually kind of like, I don't actually know why this is the case, but life happens. So there you go. So we'll come back to this a little bit later on, okay? All right, here we go. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic. So enhancing CI/CD pipeline. All right, so now remember I told you that, you know, what DevOps was all about, right? It was about Dev and Ops communicating, collaborating, integrating, and then automating. And I said that the automation part is CI/CD, okay? So when we say enhancing CI/CD pipeline, we're talking about enhancing the automation portion of DevOps. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. So traditional CI/CD pain points are these, okay? So let's just zoom in on this, right? So normally, setting up a pipeline, so that is a series of processes that will take your code and deploy it to production, means you have to write a bunch of files. And sometimes they're YAML files, sometimes they're JSON files for maybe some systems that do what's called CI servers, continuous integration servers like Jenkins, like GitHub integration, so GitHub Actions, or if you're going straight AWS, AWS called pipeline. Now, these files describe every step. Build it, test it, deploy it, right? And hopefully you could do that, crossing your fingers that it's error-free, right? But unfortunately, it is error-prone because it's complex. So maintaining these pipelines also really bear. So creating them initially is kind of hard, and then maintaining them is even harder still because things change dynamically. So when dependencies update or new compliance rules appear, you have to update the pipeline and everything that's involved in it, to match that requirement. So failures are really common in these pipelines. A build might fail due to missing dependencies. Maybe something's not connected. Maybe the server's not up and running that you need, or new compliance rules appear, right? Then you have to update them manually, worst case. So there you go. When something goes wrong, as you saw, right? Debugging eats up valuable time. That's right, okay? So also the last thing here, security checks. Oh my gosh, they usually come last because, a lot of companies says, oh yeah, we'll do security, don't worry. So they'll do last as an afterthought. And that is not the proper way to think about security, right? Security needs to be embedded in every single process, all the way from the beginning, all the way to the end, right? So instead of being like baked into the pipeline, it's usually the last thing we think about, okay? So how can we make this better, okay? So that's where Amazon Q for DevOps pipeline comes in. So using Q developer for pipeline works like this. So I have here for pipeline generation and failure analysis. So this is where Q really shines. So you can ask Q, hey, generate a code pipeline that builds my Node.js app, just fill in the blank, and then run unit tests and deploy to ECS. And I want those, files, the artifacts, encrypted while it's being stored. Okay, all right. So that's, that if you do human-wise, it probably take you like, I don't know, easily like an hour, a couple of hours, maybe even longer. Okay. And if there's something wrong, then, it takes you longer still. But Q will draft a working pipeline configuration for you. Those pesky YAML files and JSON files, right? Either as a CDK script, remember the thing that integrates into CloudFormation, or actually CloudFormation template, like straight up, okay? Or even Terraform. So if you are using Terraform for infrastructure as code tool, it'll actually be able to create Terraform code for you too. So on top of that, not only does it create these templates for you, it creates them using the best practice. And some of these best practices are like, I don't know, for security, creating least privilege IAM roles so that you don't over provision, or over permission anything. That's a security risk. How about enabling encryption on artifacts buckets? Now, you need to know, though, that the brand new buckets are now encrypted by default, but you can definitely make them better by using KMS, okay? Now, adding a manual approval step before production deployment, as you saw, in my little conversation with Q, it asks for, every permission. Says, is it okay for me to do this? Is it okay for me to do this, right? So, yeah. So, and also, you do the same thing usually in DevOps as well. Before you can deploy things into production, normally you want to have a human in the loop to say, yeah, you can go ahead and deploy, or no, I think we need additional checks. So anyway, lastly, if the pipeline fails for some reason, you can paste the error message into Q, like I did, right? And it analyzes the log or the error message and explains to you what went wrong in plain English. Yeah, not geek talk, right? Then suggest exact fixes. And yeah, when you saw me doing that, I thought I followed the exact directions, but maybe I didn't. Anyway, for example, adding a missing environment variables, correcting a build spec YAML file typos. And if you don't know what a build spec YAML file, it's okay. Yeah, the less you know, probably the better, because it's a YAML file that the code build requires to create a build environment. Okay, for those of you that's doing DevOps. Anyway, so Then let's go and take a look at the next part right here. Testing and quality. So when we say testing and quality, we're usually talking about the quality assurance testing. So if you're familiar with user acceptance testing, right? So there's testing involved before you can deploy your application to production. I mean, who asked you to make this application anyway? Usually business owners. And before you deploy it, you probably want to see that the businesses says, yeah, this is exactly what I want. Please go ahead and deploy. So that would be a quality assurance testing. But during that phase, you could do other tests, not just the user acceptance testing. You could do other tests like integration testing. You could do security testing. There are a lot of testing that's involved in the DevOps process. But remember, I said that it's much fun to it's much more fun to really create the applications. But is it really fun to create tests? So if for me, yeah. So I'll let I'll ask the Q to do that. How about how about integration testing? So you can ask Q to generate tests that simulate, let's say, API calls between services. That'd be great, okay? And Q can actually generate security tests. So for example, checking how your application handles invalid logins or nasty SQL injection attempts, right? So those kinds of tests, Q is excellent in creating, and then we use it and to conduct the test. Now, I'll show you the demo a little bit later on, okay? All right, so finally, Q does act like a code reviewer. So the code reviewer is where you write the program, and Q will check it, let's say for any kind of errors that you may have, or some security things that you may have forgotten, right? So it'll help you to make your code secure and more reliable, right? So it's like your pal, right? Code reviewer, okay? So it can really scan your let's say code repositories like GitHub and other repositories that you have, GitLab too, right? And it can pull those pieces of application and find if there are any vulnerabilities that's been reported. Okay. Anyway, so it'll help you to enforce compliance gates before code merges to, let's say, your production code branch, like a Git branch. Okay. All right. So we've been talking a lot, and let's go ahead and take a short break. So let's go and take a 5-minute break. Thank you. I'll see you after 5 minutes.
Sure, we are now going to take a 5-minute break, but before we do that, we are going to launch a quick poll that we want to invite you to participate in. Doing so helps us know how we can better serve you by telling us who might be interested in more information or in taking some additional training. In addition, we have a lot more informative webinars coming up, so please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars in order to register.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. While during the break, I did check and see what was going on with Amazon Q Developer, and I got it working. There was a little glitch in the service, I believe, but I have it working now. So let me show you what I was going to show you before. Okay, so let me do that right now. All right, so what I ended up doing was to install Amazon Q inside an older IDE, which is called Cloud9. So this is almost like a Visual Studio for Code, but AWS version. Okay, and as you could see, it says Amazon Q. So I just followed the instructions like before, and you could do the same thing. And I just did it though inside a terminal. Okay. And this may be a little small to see, so I hope you'll be able to expand this a little bit later on. So here I have opened up Amazon Q Chat, right? So now I can remember how I asked for the list of my S3 buckets. Just to make sure that everything's working, let's go and ask that same question again, right? So I'll say, please give me a list of my S3 buckets. All right, so let's go. Let's see, crossing my fingers. Okay, so it's actually looking for US East 1. And there we go. There's a list. So now we know that that's where we're at before. So what I actually wanted to show you right now is one, I'm going to ask it to create for me a brand new bucket, right? So right now I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buckets, right? So I'll just say, hey, create for me a bucket, right? Please create for me one S3 bucket in US West 2. You can name it with any name. Okay, so let's see if it does that. It may understand me, it may not. Let's see. All right, so it's thinking. And it says, I will create for you a bucket. Okay, and the name, parameters, region, and let's see, allow these actions. Yeah, so I'm going to allow these actions. So I'll say yes. Hang on, T for trust. Okay, so let's see, T for trust. Okay, and it says successfully created S3 bucket. My demo bucket. Oh, there you go. I like simplicity and clarity in the names. My bucket. All right, it says this bucket is now available at the location shown in the response. But you know what? Remember, I'm going to ask it, give me a list again. Okay, so I'm going to ask it to give me a list, right, of my S3 bucket and see if the new one is in there. There we go. Let's see. There it is, my demo bucket, right in the middle. Right? So my Q developer was able to actually create things in my environment. That's kind of nice, but it's kind of scary in a way too, right? So that's why security is pretty important. Okay. Now, remember I told you this thing about CloudFormation template, right? And let's go ahead and ask it to create for me a CloudFormation template that will create another bucket, right, in my environment. So, but this is going to be a CloudFormation template. So it's an automation code, right, to deploy application as code. So let's see. Create a demo CloudFormation template that creates an S3 bucket in current region. There you go. So create a demo CloudFormation template that creates an S3 bucket in the current region. Okay, so I think that's clear enough. Let's see. So it says I'll create a minimal CloudFormation template. So there you go. So that's the template. It's very, very minimal. But here, allow this action to trust. Okay, so I'll trust it. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so here we go. Look at that, right? So it created the template. So by the way, the thing that you saw here that has 16 lines, that's actually a very, very simple form of CloudFormation template to create an S3 bucket. Okay, and if I wanted to execute that, that is to actually use that template, they actually gave me the command, right? It says you can deploy this template using this right here. So it's actually giving me a CloudFormation, command line interface command, right? CLI command to run CloudFormation to use this template to deploy my S3 bucket. Wow. And the last thing I'm kind of curious is, can it create a Terraform equivalent, right? So Terraform is not AWS, but it's supposed to be able to create something equivalent of that in Terraform. So let's see, let's ask it. Okay, so here we go. Create a Terraform file that does the same thing. Let's see if it understands the earlier conversation, right? Just like generative AI, it should be able to remember what the context was. That its current context is it created for me a CloudFormation template to create an S3 bucket. So now I'm just kind of giving a minimal command that says, hey, do the same thing using Terraform. Let's see if this works. All right, so let's see. Oh, look at that. I'll create a minimal Terraform file. Oh, look at that. Yes, yes. That creates S3 bucket in the current region. And there it is. That's it. That is the Terraform version. Oh my gosh. All right. So then tell you, hey, you go ahead and use that by saying Terraform init, Terraform plan, Terraform apply, and this is a proper command. That is wonderful. I hope you guys are impressed. Right? Okay. So let's go back into the presentation. All right. So here we go. Okay. So the next section that we'll be talking about, after I find my mouse, is this: automating code, testing, and deployment. Okay, so you kind of saw you got a sneak peek of, okay, creating infrastructure using code. I could definitely ask, Q developer. All right, so what else can it do? Okay, here we go. Code generation. It can write code. Okay, now I'm going to show you a sample of that. Normally, you would use this in conjunction with maybe like a plugin, Q developer plugin for your Visual Studio Code and others. Okay, but anyway, this is by far the most powerful thing about Q, is its ability to generate infrastructure as code, or IAC. And you know what? You already seen it. You've seen it create a CloudFormation template to actually create something called a stack, which is the actual infrastructure that you're asking for. That's code. Okay. So if you're quite new to the concept of infrastructure as code, it's called IAC. It means writing infrastructure like servers, the network, the databases as script or template. And you know what? Let me see if I can actually draw this on top of the slide here. Okay. So basically, what happens is this: you write your code, and it's called template. Okay, and then here you say, hey, I want a VPC, so that's a network. Hey, I want an EC2, so that's a virtual machine. And let's say, hey, I want an S3 bucket, so that's an object storage. Okay, so you write this in, language, okay, like that, right? YAML file, JSON file, right? Whichever your choice. Then you send that to CloudFormation. So that's a service inside AWS. Then what it does is it's actually going to create for you that infrastructure. There you go, my little rendition of EC2 and the S3 bucket. Okay, and that is called a stack. That's a stack. Okay, so that's basically a infrastructure as code. Okay, but instead of writing this in CloudFormation, you can actually write this in CDK. Cloud Developer Kit. So instead of writing in this very special language, which is a very specific to CloudFormation, you can actually use like something like TypeScript, JavaScript to write it. So it's like one of these regular programming language. Then you can actually create, from that the template, then feed it to CloudFormation. And the Terraform works the same way in that you can go ahead and write your code in Terraform, right? And that's what Q did for me. Then I could just go ahead and deploy that using Terraform, right? It does something very similar, but using a different tool. Okay, so the code that we're talking about here is the infrastructure code, right? So that is the infrastructure as code. So it can write CDK code in TypeScript, as well as write it in CloudFormation language, okay? And as well as in Terraform language. That is like super, okay? So then, now let's talk about, how about application? How about basic application? Like, writing a Docker file for your Docker containers. How about writing Python program, right? All right, so let's see if we can write a Python program. Now, I'm just going to kind of give real simple ones, but you give it a shot, right? In your own environment and see how complex it can handle it, right? But remember, you're always in control, right? They're there to assist you, and they do make mistakes at times, okay? So let's take a look. So let's go and use the same queue because this is working. Okay, so I'll say, hey, please create a Python code that calculates price for e-commerce shopping cart. Let's see. This is just a demo. Create a minimalist. Minimalist version. Let's see. I just want something simple. All right, so here we go. Let's see if it can write a Python code. Go do your thing. Minimal Python shopping cart program, boom. There we go. This demo will calculate the total of 3 apples, 1 bread, and 2 milk. Well, that's e-commerce. Must be Uber Eats or something. Here we go. So there you go. It wrote the program. I'm not going to run it, okay? But I trust that it will. All right. So there's the code. There you are. So it can write code. Also, let's go ahead and ask it to create a Docker file. So I want to run this in a Docker container. Please create a Docker file for this. There we go, Docker file to run this program. Let's see if it can do it. Dun, 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 dun. It did it. Very, very minimalistic, but it did. So let's see. There it is. Copy that program into the Docker and then go ahead and create this. So all we need to do really is to do Docker build and Docker run, and it should run. Okay. Once again, I'm not going to run this, right, for the interest of time, right? But you can go ahead and do the same thing as well, right? Pretty powerful stuff. Okay. All righty. All right. So let's move forward. So that's code generation for you. Okay. All right. So how about testing? Yeah. So let's move on to the next part, which is another one of these things that, hang on, let me clear this. Another one of these things that, I want Q to do. And, I've done enough of these things, right? So testing solutions. So testing is often neglected because it's so time consuming, right? It takes time. But Amazon Q makes it really, really, painless, right? You just ask it to create it, not you. So you can highlight a function in your IDE and ask Q to write unit tests for that. So it'll generate them immediately using the framework that you like, JUnit, Java, PyTest for Python, you name it, okay? So, but it can also do beyond the unit testing. Q can actually generate integration testing, like, end-to-end testing, including your application in the middle and, somebody else's application on the side and stuff. So there you go. So that is integration testing. So for instance, if you have a microservice that talks to a database, Q can actually create a test that simulates the API call and checks the database results, right? So it can actually do simulation. So Q can even create a security-focused test as well. So you can ask, hey, write a test to check the invalid logins are rejected, making sure, right? Or write a test to simulate SQL injection and verify that the app blocks it. Wow, right? So that's checking for input validation. Right? So this means that your test coverage goes up because you're not really bound by your time. It can create all these tests for you, and all you have to do is just run them. This is something. All right, so let me see. Let's ask it to create a unit test for us, right? Well, I mean, since we're here, let's go ahead and ask it. Okay, ask away. Here. All right, so now we have this e-commerce, little application. So let's ask it to create us a test for unit test for that. Please create a unit test for the e-commerce program you wrote. Okay, so there we go. So now it needs to write a test that works in Python, right? I'm kind of curious, does it remember that I actually wrote this in Python? Well, let's see. There we go. Minimalist program. Let's see what it says. It said, I will create a minimal unit test for the shopping cart program. Then boom, it does it. Ah, look, it is Python. Very, very good. So then it's testing it, okay? And it says, look, adding items to cart, calculating total without tax, calculating total with tax, run the test with Python, and just run it, okay? But I didn't specify the type of test application, but you could here as well, right? If you have your favorite test application, it'll write the test code for that. Okay, but make sure that it's supported. Remember, I told you that this is not integrated with almost everything. But it's integrated with a lot of the things that most of the companies are using. So, but check it out though before you check and see if it actually works in your environment. Okay. Alrighty, so let's go back. Because I'm a security person, I'm kind of curious if it actually writes SQL injection testing. But I'm just going to hold off on that, and I'm just curious. All right, so but I'll stay curious and we'll move forward. All right, so what else is there that we can do with DevOps? Okay, so here we go. All right, so DevOps deployment automation. So that's the key, right? I mean, like I said, why do we do DevOps in the first place? Well, it's to increase the velocity by reducing friction, right? And so reducing friction, in the process, right? So deploying safely, though, is also critical. It's not just about fast. It has to be fast and safe, right? So Amazon Q can definitely help with deployment strategy like, guess what? Blue-green deployment or canary deployments. So what does it mean, right? So if you are deployment folks, you know what these things are. But let's check and see what blue-green is. So the blue-green deployment is that you run 2 environments at the same time, blue and green. So blue is a live environment. So that's the thing that's currently running, okay? Then green is the new version. So when you're ready, you flip the traffic from blue to green instantly. And if something goes wrong, you flip it back, right? So it's a safe way of deploying your application. Now, how about canary, right? Well, have you heard about this thing, canary in the coal mine? Right? So that's basically what it is that you release a new version to a very small slice of users first, then watch for any kind of issues, then gradually increase the scope and to roll out to everyone eventually. So start small, then eventually go forward until, of course, if you find problems, then you just pull it back and just return to, the traditional application. So what Q can do is that Q can generate the AWS code deploy or ECS, that stands for Elastic Container Service, configurations to implement these patterns. Wow. Okay. So code deploy is one of these DevOps service suites for automating the CI/CD process. So you can also add rollback automation. So for example, you say, add a rollback if CloudWatch alarm detects error rates above 5%. What Q will do is it'll write a CloudFormation or CDK code to write that in. By the way, CloudWatch is the center of monitoring for AWS. So you can actually tell it to watch certain things and take certain actions at a certain threshold. And these are called metrics, okay, and alarms. So what this means is that, this, with the help of Q, not only can we deploy faster because we can code faster, but it can actually deploy safer, okay? Which I love because, like I said, I'm a security person. All right, so here we go. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Now, troubleshooting, right? I got to tell you, I was teaching a class like yesterday, and it was more technical networking class. And one of the customers really, really I don't know what the person did, but it wasn't working. The environment just wasn't working. And the troubleshooting took over an hour, and we actually had to stop and say, wait, no, I'll do it, this evening, tomorrow when you come back, hopefully I'll have it done for you. Troubleshooting can really, really eat up your time, right? And so there you go. I could have just used another hand in that. I wish I would have used Q, but unfortunately in my environment, Q was not available. So here we go. So these are challenges that the operations people usually face, right? So when something breaks in production, it's like, why is it breaking? Well, usually because something new comes in and that breaks everything, right? So troubleshooting can be really, really painful, not just with the operations, but company as a whole, right? Because sometimes the system goes down, right? And sometimes you get unexpected behaviors, which is none of that is good for business. So also, because of all these complexities and all these microservices, logs are massive, massive. Thousands of lines per second. Okay, I'm not exaggerating. So microservices depend on each other. So one failure cascades like a little domino into others. And the root cause isn't always obvious. Right? It's not, right? Because it's not just about one component. You got many components, kind of working. And think about then on top of that, having security problems, like security incidents, that adds another layer of complexity. So you may not know if an outage is due to a bug or an attack, right? You don't know. So that's why, mean time to resolution, or MTTR, is such a nice metric to have, right? So if when something happens, what was historically your MTTR, right? Is it an hour? 2 hours? Half a day? right? Then faster you can find and fix the root cause, the better for your customers and for you as well. And Q can definitely help with that, okay? So because Q has diagnostic capabilities, it can diagnose, right? So Q diagnostic abilities address this really head on. So Q developer has something called operational investigations. Operational investigations, okay? What's that? Okay, so this is how it works. So Q will read in, that is ingest, logs from CloudWatch, traces from X-Ray. By the way, X-Ray is not one of these wonderful service that AWS offers that traces your request through multiple microservices. And also metrics from CloudWatch alarms and deployment events like from code deploy. So, wherever you can point the log to, it probably will be able to read those logs. Then what does it do? It looks for patterns. That's what Gen AI is really good for. It looks for patterns like errors, starting right after the deployment, for example. Then it generates root cause, and it'll pose a hypothesis as to, Terumi, I think it's this thing that's causing the problem. So for example, let me give you an example. The error rate spiked, let's say after 10:30 a.m. deployment, right? And the log shows database connections exceeded the limit. Root cause, connection pool misconfiguration. And as a experienced person, I can also say, well, it could be misconfiguration because it's right after deployment. But if it wasn't right after deployment, it could be quota, right? It could be throttling because you didn't provision enough. I mean, there could be many things. But because it knows that it happened right after deployment, most likely cause is that there was something wrong with the deployment, like a configuration file, right? So instead of you shifting through these, dozens of log groups and dashboards, Q presents a narrative explanation, easy to understand, step-by-step method of possibly what's happening. Okay, here we go. Now, there is something called observability integration. Right? Now, observability, I've been in this, IT for a long time. Observability is like, that wasn't even a thing. Like, what's that? Okay. We talk about logs. Okay. But for the past several years, I think observability has been a pretty hot topic. So observability isn't really about taking logs and say, oh, I think this happened. Somebody came in, accessed it, and they took the data and they left. That's what happened. Okay. All right. So that's a log, right? And you do analysis on the log. But the observability is a little bit more than that. That is, in fact, a lot more than that. So observability is where you can get insight from your data. Not only what happened, but what does it mean? It's pretty wild, right? So Q does integrate with AWS observability tools that you may already be using, like CloudWatch for logs and metrics, X-Ray for distributed trace across microservices. So if a customer request flows through 10 microservices and fails at the 7th, X-Ray traces it for sure. Q then explains which service broke, what error occurred, and how it connects to the overall failure. See, that's the observability part. How does that, what was the impact of that to the entire thing? So you can even bring in custom metrics, and Q should be able to interpret that too. So once again, like I said, you should check for integration, the compatibility before you commit yourself to any of these tools. Okay. All right, so now let's move on to the next section. Well, sorry about that. Next section. All right, so now let's look at real world outcomes. Okay, so these are, real world examples of companies using Q Developer and their successes, okay, and their outcomes. All right, let's take a look. Now, let's look at some companies using Q. So I have some examples here. Okay, but anybody could say, oh, it went up like 30%. The productivity went up by 30%. Faster onboarding and delivery, automated scans and pipeline. High test coverage. Okay, is it true? Okay, is it real? right? So I actually have some sites that I want to show you. So let me get those sites. Let's see. Where did I put that? There we go. I think that's where I put it. There we go. So first we're going to look at, let's see, a NAMU. Okay, so let's take a look at NAMU case study. And I will share this with you. And let me go ahead and switch to the browser. All right, so let's go here and open that up. Okay, so this is a case study, 2024. Let me get rid of that notice. Okay, and here it is. This is case study, and let's see, this should be NAMU. There it is. All right, so there it is, NAMU, right? So founded in 2022. Great. Proprietary AI for strategic reasoning based on game theory. Wow, sounds pretty neat. Okay, so what did they do? They used Amazon Q, right? Gen AI powered assistance for, right? Accelerating software development. There you go. And with Amazon Q, now we reduce development time by, wow, whopping 30%. Okay. Then, but on top of that, yeah, 30% is okay, right? But improved code quality. You know what that means? Things don't break as much, right? And they work as expected. And it freed up all that extra time that you didn't have to troubleshoot because things weren't failing. It freed them up for time for innovation, doing something new. Okay, so there you go. So that's the benefit. Okay, 33% acceptance rate for code generated by Amazon Q developer, 30% time savings, and 46% of the code written by Amazon Q developer. Oh my, close to 50% of the code was generated using Q developer. Yeah, there you go. All right, so that's the first one. Let me show you the second one. I'm just going to kind of introduce to you, like, just another one, just so that, it's not just one company that is successful. All right, so let's see here. Let's see. Yep, so the next company is, let's see. Yeah, let's take a look at BPC. All right, so that's what we'll do. We'll go to BPC. And here we are. All right, BPC. Okay, so the key outcomes. But let's take a look and see if they are actually indeed using Q developer, right? So here, let's see. Yeah, it does say AI powered solution, but let's see. Q developer. I think it's in, it's kind of hidden in. There it is. Oh no, that's not what I'm looking for here. But obviously they are using for development. And okay, so using Bedrock to build an intelligent customer support chatbot. Okay, it's a little bit off from the developer, but if you look at here, right, they are definitely utilizing the generative AI power in the DevOps team here, right? So what did they do? So let's take a look. Okay, so 66% reduction in chatbot cost. Okay, so that's a little bit different. And there it is here, right? 4,000 lines of code generated. So this is obviously Q developer. And lines of Java code scanned using generative AI. That's Q developer. And acceptance rate achieved. So that's the same thing as before, NAMU. You know what, just one more example that's a little bit more focused in on the Q developer. So let me get that for you. Hang on. And let's see if this is going to be Bolt Tech. All right, so let's take a look at Bolt Tech. Now, this is not a AWS report, but it is a report by that company, Bolt. There it is. Boltec powers its generative AI-driven, hyper-personalized customer service on Amazon Web Services. All right, so did they use Q? Let's see, Q developer. There you go. So here it is. Okay, with trial use cases of Amazon Q developer, Boltec was able to reduce the time spent on updating code documentation files by over 50%. And freeing up valuable development time. There you go. Okay, so these are all case studies of companies that are actually using Q Developer and having tangible successes that they can measure. Okay. All right, so let's go back. There you are. Okay, and by the way, there are more examples, so go ahead and Google AWS, use cases for Q Developer. You should be able to find the site. Okay. All right. Let's move forward. By the way, security is the same thing, so you could just go ahead and take a look at that. And these are real examples, okay, of benefits. All right, so now we're kind of coming to near the end. Not quite the end, but near the end. So now we're going to go into these. If you are interested, and if you say, I think this is something that we definitely should at least take a look at, right? So what are the best practices in incorporating, Q developer or, other Q or generative AI from AWS into your environment? Okay, so from the use cases that, you saw, some of the best practices are emerging, right? So how did they do it? How did they successfully, incorporate generative AI? So number one is start small, right? Start small, because, build on your successes, right? That's always a good thing. And if you're going to fail small so that you can actually, recover quickly and then move forward. Right? So this is the iterative approach. It is a, agile approach after all. Okay. So start small, learn through experience, and then start to make it bigger, right? Gradually expand. Also, really, keep track of metrics, right? So before and after. Like, okay, so we were X before and we're Y next. So you can see some tangible, quantifiable results. Like some of the successful companies we're building, like, how many lines of code, how much time saved, right? Acceptance rate, right? All those things. Make sure you have a secure setup, right? A security issue is not something you want to worry about when you are deploying something new like this. So make sure that your identity and access management, IAM, your encryption, make sure you review the processes are in place from day one. Right? It's not something that you want to leave it to the end. No, day one, right? Then, of course, coach the team, teach the developers how to use Q effectively, okay? And to review the output, right? So go through the training and track metric, like build time, error rates, test coverage, acceptance suggestions, to prove the return on investment. Okay, so there you go. So that would be the best practice. And what are some places that you may stumble and fall, right? Pitfalls to avoid, okay? So this has been, stated from the beginning. Hang on, let me grab a coffee here, hang on. All right, so do not be over-reliant on any of these generative AI tools, right? Don't be over-reliant on any tool, period, okay? But because generative AI just feels so confident about its answers, right? Notice it just gave you spit out a program. Well, how do you know it works? Well, you have to run it, okay? So don't skip reviewing, don't skip testing, make sure that the humans are in control, right? And that you are using generative AI for humans' benefit, okay? But you need to understand that, how do you talk to it? Did you notice I was using like please? Now, do you have to be polite? right, to generative AI? Not exactly, okay? So that's not the important part, right? But it is important to provide context. It is really important to give as detailed instruction as possible. Generative AI in general requires it will give you a good answer if you give it good context, okay? Good context, like all these information that you feed into it. And if you don't, look right there, garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, you can't avoid that, right? And make sure to train the people who's going to use it to teach how to prompt effectively, right? Some people call it prompt engineering. These days, people call it context engineering, whatever you call it. Learn how to talk to Gen AI or generative AI effectively. That's the ticket for getting the most, appropriate answer with the smallest number of retries. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right. ROI and getting started. Okay, so return on investment. Okay. Remember, in AWS, most of these services will cost you if you start to use it. That is, you pay for what you use, and you don't pay for what you don't use, obviously. Okay, but still, it's just the cost will be in relative to how much you use it, right? So how do you measure ROI then with Amazon Q, right? So this is just what you're seeing here is just a typical dashboard where you're measuring the ROI. Okay, but what are you measuring really? Okay, well, some of the things are like build time reduction. So how quickly are you building and deploying to your environment? And with the assistance from Q, did it shorten? If yes, by how much? Okay. How about incident resolution? Remember the mean time to resolution? Remember Q can help you with troubleshooting? Well, is it still taking as long, or is it really, really shortening the time that it takes for you to do troubleshooting and to resolving the issue? That would be a great metric to keep. How about test coverage? Because you're doing more testing, are more parts of your code tested? I hope so. Okay. How about security posture? Are there fewer vulnerabilities in your code? Are there fewer attacks that are succeeding because your code is less vulnerable? Because Q actually finds these vulnerabilities before you actually deploy them? I certainly hope so. Okay. And I actually want to show you one more site. This is the result of Q on Amazon, because Amazon, figuratively speaking, eat their own lunch. That is, they use their own services, okay? So they actually have some results from using Q itself. So let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. And I think this will be the last site that I'll actually show you. But here we go. Q developer, and this is back in August of 2024. Amazon Q developer just reached a $260 million milestone. What does that mean? Right? So we take a look and say right here. So, they're using, okay, Amazon Q developer, right? So they're using Amazon Q developer agent. Oh, by the way, Amazon Q agentic AI, if that's your keyword, yeah, it does that too, okay? They're using that. And what they did was, let's see here, Amazon has migrated tens of thousands of production applications from Java 8 or Java 11 to Java 17. So that's migration with the assistance from Amazon Q developer. This represents a savings of over 4,500 years of development work. Over 1,000 developers when compared to manual upgrades, and performance improvement worth $260 million in annual cost savings. Isn't that something, right? Quantifiable metric really is impactful. All right, so let's go ahead and cover the last part of this webinar. And let's go here. So getting started checklist. So how do you get started? Well, it's quite easy. You know how you saw me get started, okay? Because the queue is actually pre-installed in the Cloud Shell. But enable queue developer in your AWS console. So show the intent that you want to use it. Then install, the editor plugins like VS Code or JetBrains. There are plugins for queue. Okay. Then start small. Pick maybe like a sandbox repository and ask Q to generate a pipeline or test suite. Start with like what I was starting, and add one security gate. Make sure that you stop it and check. For example, require all tests to pass before merging code, okay, into your repository. Then measure the results. Track how much time Q saves, how many suggestions are accepted, and how many issues it catches early. Those are some starting metrics, okay, to do. Now, where do you get the resources? Well, there are many resources, but the resources that can help you is the official Amazon Q developer documentation. Okay, so that will definitely be a good place to start. And you know what? I lied. I'm going to show you one more site. Hang on. So let's see. I have this, so I want to show you this. There we go. All right. This isn't really documentation, but it is Q site. So here we go. I mean, AWS have like documentations galore, right? So here we go. Amazon Q, Generative AI Assistant, and go directly. Also overview, products, pricing. Okay. So there you go. This is probably where you need to start. And then go to look at all the use cases and metrics and success stories. And then you may want to go to documentation. Right? Just as easily, you'll be able to find that in the web. And why don't you come join us in our training? Right? So we provide official AWS training, and generative AI is one of these hot topics that we have been we've been training. So join us in our official learning, and also join these communities. I myself like to look at these YouTube videos, the deep dives of AWS, and they've been providing lots of generative AI type of material too. So I think that's a great place to start. All right, so finally, we are at the end where I will answer your questions.
Thank you, Terumi. That was very informative. Now I'd like to give the presentation rights over to Rimi, our vendor manager, to introduce our promotions and webinar-related courses.
Thank you, Tracy. I believe everyone must have learned something new today or would have been able to brush up their skills around the fundamentals of AWS Cloud. I would quickly like to take you through some of our hand-picked resources, which we think will immensely help in accelerating your AWS Cloud scaling journey. Well, this document here of sharing on my screen, this has been shared with you all in the handout section of GoToWebinar panel. You can download this document and access all the resources and browse all the offerings we have curated for you. So first up here is the list of our recommended courses, which we feel will best suit your learning journey after attending our masterclass. All these courses are hyperlinked. Feel free to go through them post-event and check out the course descriptions, prerequisites, and the value it can add to you and your team's skill sets. Additionally, we have curated a blend of resources, including our upcoming and on-demand events, as well as informative and educational blogs. You can make the most of these resources to gain extensive knowledge on the AWS topics they cover. Our free AWS e-learning courses follow a self-paced training model wherein you get the liberty of accessing extensive course-related videos that are delivered by the AWS subject matter experts on the go. So these videos cover the availability on the device of your choice, so you can access them from your laptop, your tablet, or from your phone as well. There are more than 280 videos covering various AWS topics explained in a very easy to comprehend language. You can simply sign up for free, watch these videos, and make the most out of them. Also, here I would like to inform you that this session is being recorded. So, in case you want to refer back to any of the topics that the trainer might have covered in today's session, we will be sharing the recording link with you through emails, and also you can access it here by clicking on this button. So you have to download this handout for that, and then if you want to revisit any topic, you can just simply click on the access recording and you can revisit the session and learn at your own pace. Now, apart from our virtual sessions, you can also catch the relevant updates related to IT and business trainings on our social media handles. So please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for all the latest updates. Our official pages and channels are linked here on the icons. Finally, if you have any suggestions regarding the topics you would like us to cover in our upcoming webinars and masterclasses, please don't hesitate to send us a direct message, or you can leave a comment on our social media posts, or you can just simply email us at info@netcomlearning.com. We would definitely try to come up with the sessions on your suggested topics. Thank you once again for joining us today. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks so much for guiding us through that information, Remy. And now we're going to go ahead and jump right into our question and answer session. How do I roll out Q to my team?
Okay, so that's a good question. Thank you. Now the checklist just gave you probably is helpful, right? But it's probably best to start with a small group of like a pilot project, right? Start small and then expand. And enabling developers and also the systems operations might be great if we're doing, of course, DevOps. Now, probably is also nice to deploy other, create a pilot projects for businesses too, because Q business is also, fantastic for the company. But yeah, create a small pilot group and then start small and start using it in your code, start using it in systems operations, start, incorporating that into your pipeline. But like I said, start small.
Can Q integrate with GitHub or GitLab?
Okay, so for those of you that don't know what GitLab is it's like a competitor to GitHub. They're both source code repository, but GitLab is it started out to be an open source version, whereas GitHub was not an open source. But GitLab actually now has a integrated CI/CD pipeline, and the equivalent of that in GitHub is called GitHub Actions. Right, so to integrate with GitHub and GitLab, you're asking about integrating, Q with DevOps platforms. And as I said, some platforms are integrated, that is, they're compatible with Q, some are not. But luckily for you, right, Q supports both GitLab, and they call it GitLab Duo, and integrates with GitHub Actions through pipelines. So there you go. So the answer is yes. Right? You can integrate those two systems with Q.
How do I ensure compliance?
Okay, that's a pretty much of an open question, right? So open-ended question. But if I were to think of like governance and compliance for your company, let's say, make sure that the identity access management is really tight. It is properly set. So that you don't over permission anything, including Q, and enable encryption, right? And always review the code suggestions that they give you, because compliance means that, look, you have to be responsible for what you deploy. And when I say you, we're talking about human. So when something wrong goes in and something breaks, and somebody asks, well, what happened? You can't just say, well, Q wrote that. No, right? So there has to be human supervision. So there you go. So that's how I would suggest that you ensure compliance. Okay. All right. Hey, thank you very much for all those questions.
Once again, I want to remind you that as you leave this session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to help us by taking a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience as we are constantly looking at how we can improve our future sessions. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. We want to thank all of you for joining us today, and if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. We hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Have a great day, everyone.